William.
Louisa, thank you. And I'll echo my thanks as well to all of you for joining this evening. We possibly have a few more that might come in late, so Louisa will share that. I'm going to share my screen. Again, the slides will be made available to you. Just drop us an email if you'd like those. Let me just start off by telling you a little bit about who we are. So Louisa and I were English language teachers. We met in Portugal many years ago. We started Global English as a company training people to teach English by distance learning in 1997. I actually think we predate Google, which is rather frightening. In 2012, we decided to start a mission arm of our day job, which was Global English. So we started Christian TEFL, which trains Christians to teach English to speakers of other languages. And it started with an intention to point people towards where they can serve. And we partner with a number of mission organizations, and a couple are represented here tonight in WEC and Reach Across. And we point people to where they can go and share the good news of Jesus through teaching English. But increasingly, the harvest field is coming to us, isn't it? And that's the reason we're here this evening. So we've been working with local churches in the UK, helping them to get alongside second language speakers, training them. And that's the whole purpose of Christian TEFL. And so over the 25 years that we've been working through the two organizations, we've trained roughly about 26,000 teachers now. Here's a little preview, just what we're going through this evening. It's going to be in two parts. Part one is going to be what makes a successful ESOL project. We'll share some ideas with you. They're our ideas. There's no total blueprint, but hopefully that might be helpful for you. Then we'll look at building a team that can work successfully to reach out. And then we'll look at how we engage the whole church so that our project doesn't just become isolated, but actually we work in conjunction with our church family. There'll be a short time for Q&A. And if you want to, as we're going through, if you want to write any questions in the chat facility, Louisa will curate those, and we'll have a short period of Q&A at the end of this first part. Then the second part, we'll look at the need for outreach, the call that we have to share the good news of Jesus. And then we'll look at how we build relationships with students, moving from a position of actually getting to know them as people, as individuals, to a point where we can actually get to a conversation about faith. There'll be a final Q&A at the end, and then we'll have, hopefully it'll be all wrapped up by 7:45, 8 o'clock. If you need to stand a little bit longer and have more questions you'd like to ask, we're happy to answer. But that's what we'll do. We'll do it in two parts. So what makes a successful ESOL project? It might look something like what we see in our picture here. I don't know. I'll just point some things out here for you to consider. Well, perhaps the first thing we think of is the number of students attending. If we get 15 people to our English cafe or class, and they each go and bring a friend, and they bring 30, what a wonderful problem to have. We're going to need more teachers. But that's one metric we can use to actually judge, is this successful or not? Maybe it's how long our project runs for. Are we the church that everybody thinks of in our town or city? If you have English language speakers, you need to go there. Does that make for a successful project? Is that how we see success? Maybe we see it in our students' progress. We're working with Sue in Colwyn Bay and her team there, who are teaching English to refugees coming in with very low levels of English. Maybe it's seeing them progress, maybe become more confident, engage in the language with the communities, maybe go on and take an exam, get their leave to remain through their IELTS exam and become able to stay in the country. Maybe it's seeing relationships and friendships blossom among our students and become that cross-cultural experience. Maybe it's seeing friendships grow between us and our students. All of those things we could perhaps consider. There are a few other things as well we might think about. As a team, as a group, are we building one another up in the church family? I remember one of my most positive experiences of being involved in church was our annual youth group, getting together and doing a holiday club. I was rubbing shoulders alongside people I'd never talked to in the church, but I'd seen before. And it was just a wonderful 4-day experience of being able to share Jesus with other members of the family that I didn't really know. And I think that could be a wonderful part of our ESOL outreach too, getting to know others in our church family who can help support our projects. It might be that actually it becomes a cross-church initiative where we're working with 2 or 3 different churches in our city or our towns and actually engaging with them because they've got second language speakers and they want help with their English. So maybe we can work together also so that we don't necessarily duplicate what they do. I think one of the reasons we all want to teach English is because we want to see Christ in our community. We want the church to be back at the center again. It's why food banks, it's why CAP debt clubs are so important. So many run through churches. And it isn't English language teaching also something that we can do alongside that for those in our community who perhaps are disadvantaged. I think ultimately most of us here tonight probably want to be able to share the gospel with our students. How do we do that? Are you nervous about it? Like I can be sometimes. Wouldn't it be great to see them come to a service, to be able to offer that invite and they come? What about seeing them come to faith, to give their hearts to the Lord Jesus Christ? Does that make for a successful ESOL project? I think perhaps maybe it's all of that it can be, so just bear that in mind when you're thinking about what makes a project for you. Now, there are 7 elements to a successful project that I think are essential for anything to go well for ESOL. It can work without these bits, and it might be that you're possibly doing this on your own or with a small team. But I found in my experience that these elements are the things that are crucial. And the first one is a coordinator, somebody to string it all together, to be the glue that holds it all together. This person really, I don't believe, should be the main teacher, and I don't believe it should be the rector or the vicar either. I think the coordinator often is best person who's a good administrator, but can be left to aside from some of those other responsibilities. I think a teaching team is important, more than one teacher, because it helps to be able to share the teaching load. If you've got 3 lessons a week, that's a lot of teaching for one person. So maybe 3 or 4 people that can deliver lessons at times to suit them. When you come into church, it's great to have that welcome right at the beginning, isn't it? That friendly smile, that offer of a handshake. And it may have taken our learners quite a bit of effort to come to our churches for the first time. Imagine you walking into a new building and you don't speak the language very well and you maybe don't know anybody else there. Just that smile and that welcome. So having somebody from your church on the door just to welcome them, that's a really important thing. And as is somebody to serve a cup of tea and coffee and a biscuit and just welcome them in. Hospitality is a key part of what we'll talk about tonight. I think you've got to do the advertising. Where are our students? Where are we going to find them? Where do they hang out? Are they finding them online through social media? Where can we place adverts for them locally? And then there's all that admin that has to be done. If we're having things in our church building, do we have to do safeguarding? Who's going to keep a register? All of those kind of things, the risk assessments. So somebody needs to be able to take care of all of that so that we can comply with all of the regulations we have to meet these days. Timing's essential. Are you going to have lessons in the morning? Maybe for the mums with the toddlers, and then do I need somebody to look after a creche? Or are we going to do it in the evenings for those that are working in the day? Who best from our teaching team could manage those things? Or do we do it on the weekends? Are people freer then? You have to think about all of these things when we're building a successful project. And finally, and I think this is one of the most crucial things, following up and being intentional about how we do that. And by following up, I mean building the relationship between what happens in the classroom and what happens in the classroom next week. It's that gap in between that we're going to focus a little bit more on tonight. So those are 7 things. I think there are 3 Ps that are also essential. You can probably guess what these are. At least you guess the first one anyway. But we don't do anything without that, do we? Prayer is first and foremost at the heart of everything we want to do. It's more than lesson planning. It's more than knowing how I'm going to introduce this lesson on functional English or going to the doctors. It's actually planning the strategy for the whole term or for what happens after our classes. Who's going to do what? And doing it with joy in our hearts. What a privilege we have that we can teach English, our own language, to people who want to learn it, and yet we have the opportunity to share the gospel as well. Wow, let's be positive. Let's be joyful about what we do. Let's be the best teachers we can be. I'll start with a small case study, if I may. This is our local church here in Exeter. We started a project late 2019, I think it was. We trained teachers, but at the very outset, I approached the rector and he sent a personal invitation to people he thought might be able to somehow get involved in a project. It wasn't the people that were already heavily involved in church. It was those maybe that were perhaps not on the fringes, but maybe had a little bit of time that they could contribute. Some to train to be teachers, others to help with hospitality and welcoming, the things we've talked about. We ran them through one of our courses, the Christian TEFL 70-hour course, and we had 4 teachers all ready to go. Hannah was going to teach the first lesson. We had Simon and Rosemary on the door with welcoming. We had another group of people who were going to do the teas and coffees. And the key students that were going to come along were going to be Chinese in coordination with the local Chinese church here in Exeter. This was January 2020. It didn't happen. Because as we realized in March, when everything happened with COVID, actually the Chinese learners in our communities knew before then, and they were being advised not to go out and not to socialize. However, members of our team have been creative and they've taken the teaching online, so that they've run a Christianity Explored course online with 4 Chinese ladies, and there are other opportunities as well, reaching out online. And the kettle is full and ready for when we actually want to start again. And we're hoping and praying that that might be later this year. But it's all about building a good team around you and finding those people to help. So that is one side of what makes a successful project. But I think it can be very easy for our projects to become disengaged from our whole church family. It can be something that just happens on a Tuesday morning. And I've spoken to churches that have found that with their projects. They don't really know what's going on in the English lessons. There's a disconnect with the church family. So this section, we just talk about how we can engage our whole church family. And we just got 6 ideas for you. Now, this isn't our rector when I told him I wanted to start another project. But I think communicating with the leadership team is crucial. Because if we're already involved in a project and we want to build and grow, we need to be in constant communication about who we could be inviting in to be a teacher or to be the next person to help with hospitality. We want to invite people in, and often our leadership team are crucial to that. They are the ones who will be able to guide us and shape us and guide our projects. So having that communication is key. If you're already involved in a project, it's really important to tell your story to your church family, to allow them to share in the great privilege and the wonderful times you're having in your lessons. Can you interview one of your students? It may be easier on Zoom than having them come to a lesson. It could be something that you could manage them through. That's what some churches have done, and actually, had some great chats. And it just helps show the church family what's happening in your classes and gives them a sense of something of belonging that they're supporting. Alongside that, This is just a flyer that we printed for our advertising in Exeter. But, could you put this in your church newsletter to show the church family and all who that goes out to, what you're engaged in? Do you have an info board in your church so that when we are back in churches again, there's something for the church family to look at where you can put your students' work if you've done something in class as a project? It's a great way of them actually being able to see what goes on. And our church has a prayer meeting every 2 weeks. We pray for particular areas of mission, of local, of national and international areas. And it's always great when we have a bit more information to know what we're praying for specifically. So if your church is praying for your project, give them some information about it. Be sensitive with personal items, of course, but ask for prayer regularly. And that's another way of helping your church stay engaged with your project. I said hospitality already. I mean, food is the heart of any great church event, isn't it? And we can do special events. We're going to talk in the second half about how we might do terms for our lessons, for our classes. And beginning each term with a bring and share or something like that could be really helpful. So, think about engaging people with hospitality. And then invite your church family along as well. They could be really helpful in sort of mixing. And it might give you an idea about who that next volunteer could be. Or if somebody comes along who's interested, might they be interested in training to be a teacher and help share the load? You could host a meal or organize a trip. Do something together as a group. We've got the World Cup coming up, we've got the European Championships coming up, haven't we? How about getting a group of people together to just watch a game together? That could be a fantastic way of just engaging socially and doing something and engaging wider members of the church as well. It might be a way of integrating some of your second language speakers who don't come to services with a wider church event, something you could invite them along to. And the other idea is the final idea, and this is get help. We've talked about talking to leadership within the church family, who's available, who might be new to church, who might be interested in supporting the project, who has experience in this. If you don't have anyone within the church family, is there that person that you've been longing to get to church but won't come, or you've been inviting and inviting and inviting, but they don't seem quite a bit reluctant to step over the threshold? Well, if you've got permission from your church, could this person come and help serve in some way and be part of the project? It's a great way of us witnessing our faith through action to those around us. So those are 6 ideas that we have. We've got more in the course itself. We'll just finish this short section with 3 tips, and they'll bounce in here. Students find studying in terms helpful. I think a natural beginning and a natural ending to a block of lessons or cafe sessions is really helpful for 2 reasons. First of all, it gives you a focus point to begin and end with something social so that it's not all English study. And that helps to build those relationships as well. And I think secondly, it gives a bit of respite for the volunteers and the teachers as well, to know that we're going to be doing a 10-week term. We're going to start in January, we'll finish at Easter, we'll do another one after Easter, and then maybe we'll have a break for the summer and start again in the autumn. And following those terms is a really good pattern. It also gives great help for the coordinators to step back and then start planning with their team what we're going to do next time. I said food a couple of times. A bring and share is a great way of letting your learners contribute. We all like to give things, don't we? I mean, one of the things I don't constantly like to be receiving. And if you can find a way that helps your learners do something to contribute, show something they've done, that can be really powerful for them too. So a bring and share helps everyone contribute. And I think the final thing to say is focusing on that whole team aspect. Remember, Paul speaking in Corinth about us being one body but many parts. We all have a part to play. And if we can bring our skills to do what we do well individually so that we can work together, that can help to build a really great project as well. I'll just finish this section with a short case study. We've been working with a church in London, Inspire St. James, and Mary very kindly gave us some feedback on some of the training that the team did here. And I think I maybe have a couple of members of the team in the room at the moment, so I won't embarrass anyone. But the very first thing we did was actually bring the team together for a very informal chat session for an hour on Zoom, just to talk about what they've been doing. And where they've been, and you know, just that where they were up to really, and just to brainstorm some ideas. It allowed them some space, and through that they actually reimagined their program somewhat. They decided to change the timings of the classes, and that led to 40% more engagement from students. So just those ideas to brainstorm and to give others a voice and to help others contribute really has helped, I think, that project, and they found that quite useful. So that's just one case study of how we've been able to work with a church and support them through that. So that brings us to the end of part one. Okay, so part two. Look for the need for outreach. We'll talk about building relationships with our students, and then we'll have a final Q&A, and then Louisa will end for us with a free gift. Now, the first thing I would say is, you know, it's not going to be possible for us to openly share the gospel in all situations. We could have some restrictions around that depending on where we're teaching. It could be not accepted by the people we are teaching. And in fact, we were very fortunate to attend the Christians in English Language Teaching Conference last month in the USA. We attended virtually, obviously, where Carolyn Dirksen from Lee University was the keynote speaker. And I think that quote that she said really struck me. It's first and foremost, it's about being good representatives for Jesus in what we in the classroom, being the best we can be. It's about doing everything we can and working to the best of our ability. So making sure that the lessons are the best, and actually we are trying to be a good Christian witness through what we teach and what we do. Just teaching English is great. And if you're stepping out in faith and that's all you can do at this point, that's absolutely fine. But I would like very much to think about whether we could actually do more. And maybe that more is outside of the lesson. I was moved by a sermon just on our Mission Sunday last month from David Harley from OMF, talking about, going to the world. He preached from Luke chapter 10, and verse 9 struck me, very much a case of Jesus sending out the 72 disciples to go ahead of him, not just to do healing and not just to share the word of God, but actually to do the two together. And I do wonder sometimes if there is a tendency for us possibly just to say that we're teaching English and that's sometimes my tick. That's what I've done. Are we missing an opportunity? I guess is the question I would ask. Are we missing an opportunity to really engage with people and talk to them about Jesus? And that's what this second section is going to be about, maybe how we can do that. And I've taken some inspiration from Paul Williams' book, Intentional, which I'd recommend to you. It's a short little book, but it's really been helpful. It's about talking about Jesus, really. It's not specific to second language speakers, but I've found in my experience that fear is sometimes something that stops me from sharing the gospel. I'm not the world's most comfortable person speaking. I'm not the world's most comfortable person speaking about Jesus. And I think my fear comes in four forms. I'm worried about getting it wrong. I mean, it's a big Bible, and I know we look at the New Testament through the Old Testament lens, but what about if somebody asks about, what's going on in Isaiah 55? I'm not sure that I'd be able to clearly explain that like Philip did to the Ethiopian. I'm just worried about getting it wrong sometimes. And that's just a basic fear I have. And if I'm worried about getting it wrong with a native English speaker, I might be even more worried about not being understood by a second language speaker. How am I going to explain Jesus in really easy language so that they can understand without actually kind of really, messing up the, and what about, and what about things like the Trinity? How might I sort of, explain that? I'm not quite sure. I wonder about offending people. I mean, Christianity is seen very much as offensive by some. Um, am I going to put people off by what I say? What would they think of me? That's a fear sometimes I have. Maybe not knowing an answer to a question. That's something that has struck me. And this is where this book really came in helpful, because Paul Williams talks about, that was one of his fears too. But he made a point of actually saying that, if I didn't know the answer to a question, he said, that's a really good question. I'd love to get together to talk about it with you. Let me just go away and find out a little bit more. Could we meet? And then we can go over it in a bit more detail. Not knowing the answer to a question and saying that is better than trying to wing it and getting it wrong. At the same time, you've got the opportunity then where you can go out and research it and talk to someone and actually then, have them and open the book to them. I think this struck me as well from Matthew 28. We have this opportunity to share Jesus, but actually we have more than an opportunity. We have a responsibility. The Great Commission tells us to go out and make disciples of all nations, to share the good news, to offer the love of Jesus to people. And I wonder if sometimes we're hiding a little bit away from doing that. It's for all of us. It's not just for those that we consider to be great people who are great at talking. I think that quote from Peter is one that's a favorite of mine, to always be prepared to give the reason for the hope. And if you don't know an answer to a question, it's fine, but never be caught by that same question twice. One of the best ways I can explain it is about 10 years ago, I was part of a team of street pastors here in Exeter. You can see, hopefully, the motley crew that was there one day, just in an afternoon event. It was just wonderful to be with Christians from other churches engaged in that ministry. But also we had to be accessible to questions. People would come up to us with the strangest questions like, so what part does the Easter Bunny play in the Christmas story? And I could quite firmly say that, well, actually none whatsoever. But interesting that you asked that question. It's about, and when people will come up and engage and say things, well, I don't believe in Christianity, you turn it back to them. Well, okay, what's brought you to that viewpoint? Why do you believe that? And again, asking questions is a great way of building that relationship. And if you ever want a team bonding experience, watching a team of street pastors on a wet, soggy Saturday afternoon in St. Thomas Leisure Ground on a bouncy trampoline will give you quite a bit of entertainment. I want us to be interested in our learners, to get to know them one by one, to get them to know them one-to-one, so that we can build trust. Yes, I mean, we want to teach them English. What a great privilege it is that we have to do that. I think we'd all love to build more cohesive and, societies and communities after what we've been through in this country over the last 2 or 3 years in particular. And we would love to build those relationships with our learners. We'd love ultimately to be able to share the good news of Jesus with them. I think that's where we'd like to get to. And that is what I'd like to, hopefully, that you'll be able to take away from this, some encouragement to help you get to that point. So I'm going to share with you 3 steps to building relationships. Now, these are my ideas. They're not necessarily the same for everybody. And some people might jump straight up to step 3. But I think, first of all, we need a platform. Now, the platform is, if you're doing English language cafes or classes and you're greeting people with smiles and friendly faces, you're already on step 1. Make English a safe and welcome place, a place where they can come and enjoy themselves, to relax and feel comfortable and confident. I think we have to do that before we start thinking about introducing those faith conversations. We need to build the base. And of course, all our learners are different. We can't assume that 2 people coming from the same country share the same experiences, or necessarily the same faith, or necessarily the same degree of faith. So we have to start thinking about them as individuals. And how do we find out more about them? Well, simply, we just ask questions. But let's keep our questions simple because we want them to be able to understand. So I'm just going to put up a few questions here that we've asked and we would ask. Just take a look at these as they come up. Key here thing is to listen to their answers. And then think the key thing now is the next question. What's the next question you would ask after those basic questions where you found out a little bit about their background? And this is, I think, important. We want to be asking them something at the end of the lesson where we might ask these questions about what they're doing between now and the next lesson. Because if we can ask that question, we can then suddenly step out of the English classroom and build the bridge into their lives. So think about what questions you could be asking them about what they're going to be doing between now and the next class. Just some examples. It could be that one of our students is going to got to go to the post office to fill in a form. It might be that they've actually got to do something for a residency or a permit. It might be that that's a struggle for them. You could offer, look, yeah, can I help you? Can I come with you? And suddenly from English, you're actually stepping into helping them in an everyday practical task that they need. Or maybe one of them is going to the hospital with their child because the child's sick. Well, is that something they need English help with, or do they have support with that? Or one of them's son is playing in a football match that afternoon in a five-a-side or something like that. That's a great activity. Or even, ask them about what they're going to have for dinner tonight. Are they cooking for a family, or are they eating out? What are their plans? Just keep it simple, very easy, basic forms of vocabulary. And then when you've got that information, take it back to your team. Make some notes. Remember what each student was doing. And this is where having a team is crucial. This is where having your welcoming team ask the questions of the individuals so that they can help you build a picture. If it's helpful to have a file on each student just to help you remember, make a few notes. Pray for the students as well with what they've shared. And then in the next time, ask them about what happened. So, when you went to the doctors, how was your child? Or how was that meal that you had? All of these things help us bridge over from English language to build relationships. And that's the platform that we want to get to. This will help us take us that step further. And this is the question that Louisa asked me, and I can hear all of you probably shouting that question quite loudly on mute at the moment. What if they are beginners? Yes, I know, and it is so difficult, isn't it, to communicate. Do what you can. Don't be afraid. Use mime, use realia. It could be just a little bit, I can help you write, or you might things like that. I mean, talk about your family. Use a picture of your family. You could say, "Oh, look, here I am. There's my wife and my two daughters I have. Do you have a family? Tell me about your family." And if they're slightly more advanced, then you could get onto different styles of haircut in lockdown. And I'll quickly move on. But you're building that relationship. You're building that platform. You're taking it from the English class into their lives. Maybe take it that next step. Could we meet for a walk or for a coffee? Could we get together somehow? Get to know your students individually, get to know them as a group. And then suddenly this is moving you from that step 1 to step 2, which is at that point we can start thinking about asking about faith. And what I would say is this is not a 1 week thing. This could be a term thing. It could be a year. It could be a relational thing that goes on. It will be different for each student because, as we know, each student comes in at a different point. So if we're asking about faith and taking that next step, don't be like me. Don't be afraid. Don't be like our young lady here, worried about it. Let's do it with confidence. Let's engage knowing that actually we've got somebody behind us who will give us the prompts to help us. Here's some ideas to get started. Let's talk about them and take an interest in where they come from, because can't open the door to talking about Jesus without actually knowing what they believe. So let's talk and ask some questions about faith in their country. Here are some questions you could ask. It all helps us to build a picture and for them to see that we're interested in them. Maybe you could then compare it with what it looks like here in our country. So we could follow on those questions with, it might be that actually they don't practice their faith. They have no faith. It could be that they're a regular worshipper. All of this will help us decide at what point it might be appropriate to extend the conversation. Again, we're building that relationship platform. And if people will begin to open up about things that are important to them, then that gives us more of an open door. Again, we can feed that back to our team. And then possibly we could be ready to move to the next stage, which is asking about Jesus. When you are ready, and when you feel that they are ready, here are some possible questions you could ask. It could be that that's the person they think of when they think of Christians. I don't know. It could also be Donald Trump. So we have to be prepared for any answer. That question might provoke an interesting response. But it will help us see where they are, their starting point. And then when we know that, we can engage. And note in the second question how we've possibly used the present tense. And if you can get that third question, and if you get a positive response, can you hear the creak? Can you hear the creak of that door opening? It's inviting you to step through. Because now you've got the opportunity to say, well, actually, this is what we believe or what I believe. And now you're actually on that third step of the platform. You can share your story. And people love stories. Make it personal to you. Everyone's story is unique. And think about what you might say. You might use pictures, keep it simple. There will be some past tense in there, of course. There'll be some future in there maybe as well. Be humble and invite them to find out more. Perhaps you might invite them to come along to a Christianity Explored course. You might decide that you want to run a Christianity Explored course or maybe a visa course from Friends International. A very easy English way of actually engaging people and getting them to find out more about Jesus. Or maybe you could invite them to a service. What would be an appropriate one to come to? Again, talk to your church leaders about that. When might be appropriate for them to come? Invite them. Thank you for listening. I hope you find that helpful. And for now, I'll say good night.
Bye all, stay safe.